I'm not 100% convinced that a rule-based way is best.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast. It's Walter here, and I've got Darren. Hello, Darren.
Hello, Walter.
So you've got an interesting idea, Darren, that I saw you posted in the forum about. I'll let you explain, but it's come, I suppose, from the gambling world. So for a lot of traders, that's kind of an emotional gut response just to that fact. But can you explain sort of where you're going with this and what intrigued you about this this idea from the gambling world?
Yeah, well, as you probably already know, I quite like the association of trading and gambling. In particular, poker, but all forms of gambling, really. And I know that's a really contentious topic for a lot of people. A lot of people are really kind of anti making associations between gambling and trading. But for me, there's a lot of parallels there, and I think we can learn stuff from that world, if you like. And the idea I posted was this: it was a professional poker player, female professional poker player, particularly good, she's amazing track record, and she was discussing this idea of using gut. And already we know this is something that's talked about a lot in trading, this ability to use discretion, this ability to kind of have a sort of sixth sense about what's the right thing to do in a certain situation. And what she said really hit home with me, and I completely agree with her. And her take on it is that saying that you're using your gut, your intuition or discretion can often be a bit of a cop-out and a bit of a lazy way of dealing with an uncertain situation. And her sort of main idea was that using your gut or your instinct can be really powerful, but whenever she does it, she always looks at the facts first. She says she looks at the math, she assesses the situation on the facts first, and then she applies the gut. And I think in trading, this sort of connecting the two is often missed. And if someone says to me, I just didn't like the look of it, that's not good enough for me. Okay, I didn't like the look of it, I didn't like how it was feeling, but also then you add your facts in. Also, I've got 4-hour profit on the table. It makes sense to cover some of that, and you're kind of adding the facts and what you know for sure into the uncertain situation before you're using your gut. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn. And I think this idea of using discretion to be a better trader, it's not something that it's about combining those two together. I think really hit home with me, and I'd be interested to see whether you agree on that.
I don't think it's easy. I think I see where she's going, right? But here's what I think we know that confirmation bias is a big deal, right? And especially for traders. So what I would say is if somebody is new to trading and they start using this where I'm going to use my gut and then I'm going to look at the facts, I'd be concerned that they would be using confirmation bias to weed out the so-called facts that go against their hypothesis and just pay attention to the ones that support it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing, like how do you know that what you are doing is actually objective? Are these objective facts you're looking at, or are you just sort of filtering it through your hypothesis to try and get to the point that you want to be, whatever that is, whether it's taking a trade, dumping a trade, reducing your size, increasing your size, or whatever it is. So I don't know. I mean, I think one of the best things I've ever learned in trading in terms of this, from this sort of point of view, the gut thing or intuition thing is to watch a 1 minute chart, and when you decide that the 1 minute chart has gone too far, or whatever, what you do is you watch a 1 minute chart and you decide, when you're convinced that where the market's going to go, then you take a trade. And I would say This is not trading advice. Definitely do it on demo or whatever. But what's cool about this is it's almost, and it's magic how often when you see like a 1 minute trend and you say, okay, I'm going to get on the trend, that's the end of the trend. Or when you see the 1 minute going and okay, it's going to bounce in reverse here, it just keeps going. It's just magic how easy it is to be wrong consistently. On the 1 minute chart. There actually used to be, I don't know if you've ever seen this, Darren, but there used to be this website. It would have like the euro, okay? It was like a game. And it doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if they got into trouble with the law or how what happened, but what the game was like this. If you could get something like 11 or 12 or 13, I can't remember what the number was, in a row, you would win this big pile of money, okay? And the game was, so it was like a gambling game. And the game was, you were to predict where the euro would be in the next 30 seconds. Or maybe it was 60 seconds or something like that. So what you would do is there would be a line, and the euro is right here. And what you had to do was predict whether the euro would be above that line or below that line 60 seconds from now. And so you had all these people trying to do it. And of course, they'd get to like 5 or 6 or 7 in a row, and then they'd lose, And you could bank, you could stop. Like you could do it today, and if you got it right, then you could come on tomorrow and see if you can get it right again, or you could try to do them all at once and that sort of thing. What was fascinating about that was how difficult it was for anybody to hit the jackpot, so to speak, by doing, by getting 11 in a row. I think it was 11 in a row that you had to get to win the deal. It kind of reminds me of this because I think the Turtles were Richard Dennis and William Eckhard were right when they instructed the Turtles that when you have 2 trades to take and you can only take one of them because you have too many positions in the market, always go with the one that you think is the least likely to work out. And the reason why is because our gut is so wrong in the beginning. I'm not saying that you can't make it better and get to the point where it's useful. I think you can. But I think in the beginning, it's almost uncanny how bad we are with it. And what's interesting is that when you get really good at this stuff, and it doesn't matter if it's trading or juggling or whatever, it's really difficult for you to explain what you're doing. It's not natural because so much of it is automatic. And we know that from the cognitive psychology research. I know that psychologists definitely don't have it figured out at all, not even close, but and I know I keep referring back to psychology studies and things like that, but really it's just kind of a glimpse. It's our best guess that we have right now. And one of the best guesses we have about expertise, and some pretty good research along those lines, Deanna Kuhn is one who's done some work on this, is that when you are an expert at something, it's really, really difficult for you to explain it. Especially if you haven't been explaining it along the way, throughout your journey. When you were a novice and started getting your bearings, if you haven't been explaining it along the whole way of your journey, then if you just all of a sudden ask an expert to explain what they're doing, you'll often find that sometimes it's really difficult for people to understand exactly what the expert is doing, and that's because you don't know what you're doing. And so I think this intuition thing is really tricky. And I don't know that it's as easy as the gambler points out. And maybe it's because she's a woman, and it's funny to say, but they have a much stronger connection between both sides of their brain, and this is well documented. So what that means is their logical side and their sort of emotional side of their brain, there's a stronger connection there. And for men, it's just not physiologically. We don't have that connection. We often find ourselves kind of one side or the other sort of dominates depending on what we're doing or what kind of mood we're in or whatever, whereas women are easy. It's easy for them to switch back and forth there. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but I would have to fall down on the side of thinking this is probably not, it's not easy to do if this is what you're trying to do because of confirmation bias and all, and it certainly would be, I would say it would certainly be really difficult to do if you're new to trading. To me, that just wouldn't work. But those are kind of my general thoughts. Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying basically intuition is or this gut is a good thing to use, but it takes a lot of experience to get good at it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that your intuition, reversing it and fading your intuition is a really good thing to look at when you're starting out as a trader. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's really hard to go against your intuition as well, your gut feel, isn't it?
Yeah, unless you've been wrong a lot of times. I mean, I remember when I first opened a live account with my friend, and he tripled it the first night, right? So we had this $2,000 trading account, and I think it was FXCM. It was when FXCM just started, because we couldn't figure out how to wire money to Saxo Bank in Denmark or something like that. We just didn't want to do that. So FXCM came on board, and which of course is no longer in the US. They've been booted. But yeah, so we tripled it the first night. And then after that was all downhill. And we actually, at one point, we looked at each other. I think it was a week later. So we tripled it, he tripled it the first night. I didn't do that. And then we looked at each other and we said, it was like a light bulb moment. Why don't we just reverse all of our trades? Because we've been so consistently wrong. And he's like, yeah, we got to do something like that, man. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to get it right intuitively as a new trader. And most traders I know, they say that, but I don't know. I think you're talking about something different, right? You're talking about, someone who's been around the block, has cut their teeth, kind of knows what they're doing in terms of operating their system, and sees it, how it works in different types of markets and all that. And you're talking about a different sort of deal.
Yeah, well, one of the examples she gave was, let's say she has a system for what hands she plays and what hands she'll fold. And let's say, for instance, in this example, she's got a hand that she would normally play. But sitting opposite her, there's a guy who she has worked out only ever plays very strong hands. So she sat there with a hand that she would normally play, but this guy's not folding, and she knows that he always plays strong hands. So in this instance, she kind of breaks her system and folds a hand that she would normally play. And I suppose the parallel in trading would be, you have a system, let's say you have a system of where you take profit, and your experience is telling you that the market is just kind of not moving in the way that it should be for your system to work out. So perhaps you might move out of your usual trade management rules to do something differently. And it's kind of where I tried to get to with my trading. I did try and go against this last year and say, okay, no, let's just be completely rule-based and systematic. And it didn't work out for me last year because there were some sort of major political events. The market condition changed quite dramatically, and I didn't react to that because I was working on the premise that long term my system will be okay. It is, but I did I took more losses last year than I needed to because I didn't have that extra element of my sort of gut saying, okay, the system works long term, but something different's happening here. Maybe I need to adjust, the risk side of my trading.
What if instead of looking at it from that point of view, you say because your gut wasn't, part of the equation, or it wasn't a strong part of the equation last year? What if you simply said you had a rule where if you hit X number of trades that losers in a row or X percentage drawdown or something, that you would just kick in some sort of rules about changing markets or stop trading or something? I mean, I don't know if maybe you do have those rules, but in other words, is there a way to get around that same issue, like you said? Because the markets did get, especially the market that you trade or were trading last year, it was pretty crazy. So what, I guess my question is there a way to get around that without pulling the gut or the intuition into it?
Yeah, I mean that is the other route, and there's kind of flaws in both ways. I mean, it's a question of which one can you do and perform the best. Are you best to kind of leave it open to your gut instinct and make the decision when you know, or are you better to kind of work out the optimum level of drawdown? And in the past, where I've tried to sort of work out, something I do with my trades is I place them above the high and the low of a previous closed bar. And I went down this wormhole before of trying to work out what is the optimum number of pips above and below, so you don't get faked into trades that, could you put it 2 pips or 3 pips above and avoid enough of those fake outs for there to be an advantage? And I just found that I was going round in circles with that. So I'm not 100% convinced that a rule-based way is best, but at the same time I can't guarantee it's not. It's very difficult because just minor changes in the market conditions can sort of throw those things way off. And the popularity of using discretion from experienced traders as opposed to very systematic rule-based way of trading, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer really, whether you're better to define a rule. You can end up having like so many rules that you kind of then start affecting the upsides of the system as well.
Oh yeah.
I know. What's your take on it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm with you on that. Yeah. No doubt. I mean, I think if you read or listen to what systematic traders have to say, is exactly what you just said, Darren, which is the big no. If there's one takeaway from any of the systematic traders, that takeaway is beware the system that has too many rules. They're all pretty much in agreement. That's about the only thing they're in agreement with, which is too many rules, too many degrees of freedom, and you're ruining. You're really ruining the system. It's you run the risk of curve fitting. Yeah.
Yeah, and also with setting a max drawdown, one of the issues I have with it is that the market can be moving nicely for me and I can just have a little bad run and have quite a bad drawdown. But if the market's moving in the right sort of way, I know sooner or later I'm gonna catch that move and I'll clear most of that loss and probably make some profit as well. Whereas if we, for example, we take the pound dollar at the moment, we had this sort of big shock announcement the other week where we're going to have an early election. And straight after that, the pound dollar's gone really flat. And it's really quickly obvious that it's just, it's not going to move now unless some more news or something changes. The market's kind of moved to where it's... And trying to find a rule to avoid what's happening with the pound dollar now, but not avoid those periods where, the market conditions are actually all right, just having a bit of a bad run. That's the difficult bit. And you can end up by, if you think, right, well, I'll just put this rule of drawdown on there, then you can find that you're also taking your edge away in other conditions. And that might not be true for all types of trading, but I feel for the way I trade, the rule-based way sometimes kind of has that effect.
Yeah, and to me that reminds me of a few things, or brings up a couple of issues, what you're saying. So one thing I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed, is that to me, when I look at the market, well, maybe not, maybe you don't see this, and this isn't a swipe or anything at your style. It's just what I see when I look at the market is I see strong trends followed by trendless moves, sort of directionless chop, and then another strong trend. And even during a trend, you'll see that high tide, low tide sort of a look. So when I look at the pound chart as we record this, it's kind of like, yep, that makes sense. So it's made the strong move, and now it's kind of just resting, and it'll probably bump up again, or it could turn around and fall down. But either way, it's just kind of in the resting phase. So as a discretionary trader, I look at that and say, well, I'll just wait for it to decide that it's going to break out of that little consolidation before I get in. That doesn't necessarily come into your approach, right? I mean, it's more. I mean, well, I guess it could. I mean, it has. Apparently it has, where you want to say, well, maybe I'll step aside here and just wait for it to break out again. But typically, you're just looking for any little turn, and because that turn could be the big move. That could be the big move.
What I like is for a systematic way of trading to have long-term positive expectancy. So over a very large number of trades, you're going to have bad periods, good periods, brilliant periods, and really terrible periods. And my approach was, well, if you've got that positive expectancy, surely the best thing to do is to remove as many decisions as possible and just trade the system. And that's all well and good, but I think it's kind of doing intelligence, is that the right word? The abilities of our brains a bit of a disservice. And sometimes it can just be obvious, like you say with the pound dollar now, it's just kind of obvious. Okay, well, just step out and wait until it starts moving, and then go back to just applying the system. And it's just that slight element of discretion that you can put in there. I think if you can master both of those, have a good long-term expectancy from your system, and then just have the ability to just decide when to step out when things are really bad and avoid some of those, I think that should make a big difference on your bottom line at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And, it reminds me of the trader interview I read where he was a systematic trader. He has thousands and thousands of trading systems. And you know what he does every week? Every week he just looks at all of his systems that are, I suppose they're all trading demo accounts, so they're not really trading live. And then he looks each week and he says, okay, these are the 3 systems that are performing the best right now. So I'm gonna turn those on and make those live this week. So that's his entire thing. And so, first of all, it's kind of like what you're saying. Like, okay, I've got this system where it basically takes every turn in the market, and then my job is to maximize my profit out of those turns. And because you never know when the next turn in the market is going to be the big turn and really, really move. But you've added this element of discretion, which is, look, if it's obviously just chopping around, I'm going to wait until it stretches out of that and starts moving again. So I'm just going to hold back and either switch markets or just not trade or whatever. And it's fascinating because it's kind of the same idea as this guy, isn't it? Where he says he's a systematic trader, right? But I would argue that he's not. I would argue that he's not because it's almost like putting your finger in the geyser or the dam that's starting to break, and you try and plug all the holes with all your fingers in the dam that's starting to break. As humans, it's amazing to me how good we are at allowing our decision making, our own discretion to seep into things, even if we say no, we're just going to let the computer do it, or we're just going to make this really mechanical. It's almost like we just can't help ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm some of some of the ways I trade, it literally is place a trade at the close of every bar. But every time I do that, my brain is yelling out, "Are you sure you want to take this one? It doesn't feel right." Even when, without a doubt, the right thing to do is place a trade, there's always that nagging thing in the back of your mind saying, "This doesn't feel right." That kind of slips in there. I'm not sure whether you can. I'm not sure I could ever get rid of it. I don't know if that's true for everyone.
I guess so.
That's all the time we have for this episode, but in part 2, you will hear the following. The counterproductive thing that every trader thinks about when entering a trade, and why this is counterproductive. Why Darren is uncomfortable when I am most comfortable during a trade, and vice versa. And when following your rules can be absolutely devastating to your bottom line. Darren does a really good job of explaining this. How to build up a profitable trader's gut, and what this means. And finally, the best place to start for new traders who are trying to create their own trading system. All of this and more in the next episode 91 of the Two Traders Podcast. See you then.